What do you do when your entire empire is on the verge of collapse? If you're Sean Diddy Combs, apparently, you put on a show, but not the kind you're used to. No lights, no music. It's just a federal courtroom, a stone-faced judge, and one of the most powerful men in music standing there like he was about to be led to the electric chair. And as the jury watched from behind the scenes, the question everyone kept asking was, why didn't a single person show up to defend him? This wasn't just another courtroom appearance. This was the final act of Diddy's trial. And what happened? Inside those walls might be the most revealing look yet at who he really is on, what he's truly afraid of. Let's break down exactly what happened on that last explosive day and why Diddy's silence might have screamed louder than anything he's ever said. When Diddy stood up in that courtroom, it wasn't just to speak, it was to perform. Eyewitnesses described him rising from his seat slowly, hands folded, voice soft and respectful. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, freely and voluntarily. His tone was theatrical, most like a scene from the Green Mile. Like he was on death row, facing judgment. This wasn't the same man who ruled the stage at the BET Awards or strutted down red carpets with a smirk. This was a calculated image shift, humble, broken, human. But it didn't land the way he hoped. People watching didn't see sincerity. They saw strategy. They saw a billionaire trying to play the victim. And the biggest twist, the jury wasn't even in the room. Which begs the question, who is Diddy really performing for? If you're still watching, you're the kind of person who sees through the smoke. So don't miss the next upload. We're breaking down the biggest unanswered questions, from the sealed documents to the missing witnesses. And we're diving into what this case means for the music industry as a whole. Like, subscribe, bookmark, and get ready, because the show might be over for Diddy. But the investigation is just getting started. This trial may be remembered as the final chapter in the bad boy legacy. Not the music, not the fame, but the unchecked ego behind it all. Diddy didn't just build a brand, he built a persona of invincibility. And when you live long enough, thinking you're untouchable, you stop worrying about consequences. But this is what the fall looks like. No entourage, no applause. Just a courtroom, a judge, and a man who used to have the world in his hands, now grasping for any version of the truth that might let him walk out free. And whether the jury convicts him or not, we've seen the real story behind the mogul, behind the image, behind the silence, because the truth always finds its way out. There's a real chance the jury could deadlock. That's how mistrials happen. And if that happens here, Diddy won't walk out clean, he'll just walk into a second trial. A longer delay and a more aggressive prosecution. But even if by some miracle he's found not guilty, what does that really mean? It won't make the witnesses disappear. It won't change the lawsuits already filed. It won't undo the damage to his legacy. Because no matter how many lawyers you hire, there's one thing you can't buy back once it's gone: credibility. And right now, Diddy's is in the red. While the courtroom moves carefully and deliberately, the internet moves fast. Too fast sometimes, but in this case, the tide turned early. The moment footage, lawsuits, and detailed testimony started circulating. The hashtags wrote the verdict, and whether he walks or not, Diddy's public image won't recover. The court of law has rules. The court of public opinion, it has memory, and every silence, every deflection, every moment he chose to posture instead of answer, is being replayed online again and again. Even if he wins in court, he's already lost the narrative. Here's the part no one wants to talk about. Diddy isn't an outlier. He's a blueprint. Powerful men, protected by wealth and status, have gotten away with abusing others for decades. The entertainment industry didn't just look the other. Weight profited from it. And when the spotlight finally turns on them, they act shocked, confused, victimized. But Diddy's downfall, if it comes, won't just be about his choices. It'll be a warning shot to everyone still hiding behind fame. You can throw parties, you can buy silence. Kate, you can even control the narrative for a while. But when the truth catches up, it doesn't matter how rich or famous you are. The fall hits just the same. While Diddy's team tried to put on a performance, the prosecution kept it simple. No theatrics, no celebrity drama. Just a steady drip of disturbing facts. They laid out a timeline. Escorts moved across state lines. Massive cash payments. A pattern of abuse and evidence of power used as control. They didn't have to over-explain. They didn't need a smoking gun. The pattern was the proof dot, and by the time they rested their case, the story was clear. This wasn't about one bad night. This was about years of silence, control, and manipulation. And when the defense offered nothing in response, no witnesses, no expert testimony, just old text messages that looked less like a defense, and more like surrender. This trial isn't just a legal case, it's a brand implosion in real time. Diddy spent decades building the image of a mogul, a mentor, a maker of stars. From Bad Boy Records to Revolt TV, he sold the image of someone in control, someone untouchable. But scandals have a way of stripping away polish. What we're watching now is the unraveling. Endorsements gone, collaborators distancing themselves, A-list friends going quiet. It's the same industry that once stood on his shoulders. It's now pretending they don't see him drowning. Because if this trial ends in conviction, it won't just be Diddy who goes down. It'll be everyone who enabled him, everyone who stayed quiet, everyone who helped cover it up. That's why the silence is spreading, not just in court, but across the whole industry. In the weeks leading up to the defense's turn, insiders claimed Diddy's legal team had a witness list that was pages long. Escorts, executives, bodyguards, industry friends. But when it came time to step up, not a single one showed. Where were they? Were they scared? Paid off? Unwilling to lie under oath? Or did they know that standing on that witness stand meant putting themselves at legal risk? Because here's the truth. If any of those witnesses said it was all consensual, the prosecution could tear that statement apart, especially with a paper trail of payments, NDA agreements, and prior lawsuits stacked against them. So instead of risking perjury, they stayed silent, just like Diddy. And once again, silence spoke volumes. When a man like Diddy, who's made a career out of controlling every room he walks into, sits down and says nothing, you have to ask, what's really going on behind the silence? Because silence isn't neutral. In a courtroom, silence is strategy. And in this case, it was all he had left. By choosing not to testify, Diddy avoided cross-examination. He avoided being asked under oath about allegations that span decades. And more importantly, he avoided being caught in a lie. But that silence created a void. And into that void, every unanswered question started to echo louder. Where were the denials, the explanations, the so-called truth? Sometimes when you choose not to speak, the jury fills in the blanks for you. And the version they come up with might be worse than anything you could have said. Diddy's career was built on performance, flash, control, image. But in court, none of that matters. No cameras, no edits. No edits. And in that room, when it was time to speak for himself, he stayed silent. If he was innocent, where were his defenders? If it was all consensual, why did no one else agree to say so under oath? In the end, the most powerful man in hip-hop was alone. Not because the world turned on him, because no one could honestly defend what they saw. The music industry might stay quiet, his fans might debate, but the justice system, still watching. And what comes next might be the biggest fall from grace we've ever seen. So where does this leave us? The jury is heading into deliberations soon. Closing arguments are next. The prosecution will recap weeks of testimony, evidence, and disturbing detail. The defense, well, they've got a handful of texts and a man who stood in court pretending he was on death row. If the jury sees through the performance and all signs say they might, then Diddy's future isn't in music. It's in a prison jumpsuit. And if the jury's divided, a mistrial, a reset. But even then, the damage is done. Because the court of public opinion has already reached its verdict. Just when you thought the defense had run out of moves, they pulled one last trick out of their briefcase. Rule 29. It's a legal motion asking the judge to throw the whole case out before the jury even decides. And their argument that the government didn't prove trafficking, didn't prove force or fraud. And this is real, that the very laws against trafficking might be unconstitutional. Yeah, you heard that right. Diddy's lawyers tried to argue that the sex trafficking statute itself should be thrown out. As if the real problem isn't what he's accused of, but the law that makes it a crime. At this point, it didn't feel like a defense. It felt like desperation. Back to that courtroom. The jury was gone when Diddy stood up and declared with trembling voice that he wouldn't be testifying. So again, who was he performing for? Answered the judge, because if this case ends in conviction, it's not the jury who'll decide how many years he serves. It's the judge. And make no mistake, Diddy knows how the game works. That performance, that faux humility, that was him planting seeds, hoping for mercy later. But the truth is, judges aren't fooled by theatrics. And when the prosecution is stacking evidence, theatrics won't be enough. Instead of live testimony, Diddy's legal team leaned on a handful of text messages. Old messages from Cassie where she said things like, "I love you," or "You're my best friend." Messages pulled from a decade-long relationship and spun into a narrative of mutual affection. But here's the reality. Anyone who's been in a toxic relationship knows those messages don't mean peace. They mean survival. They mean confusion. They mean trauma. It's not just tone deaf, it's desperate. Because no matter how sweet the text sounded in 2017, they don't erase what Cassie described in her 2023 lawsuit. Beatings, coercion, trafficking, and manipulation so deep she had to relearn how to be a human being. Here's the part that left even the courtroom veterans stunned. Diddy's defense team rested. Just like that. No witnesses. No testimony. No insiders. Nothing. Remember, this is a man who promised to bring forward employees, bodyguards even, escorts who supposedly would testify that everything was consensual, even enjoyable. Where were they? Nowhere to be found. No KK. No Duroc. Not one person from Bad Boy Records. Not even one of the countless women he allegedly flew across the country could be convinced or paid to testify on his behalf. And that silence, it said everything. Because when your entire defense is, they were willing, but not one of they shows up to say it, you've already lost the room.